Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the East Brandywine Township Board of Supervisors AM meeting for Thursday, November 3rd, 2022. Tonight's agenda, just reminding, a recording device will be used during this meeting. Public comment for agenda items, rules of conduct of public meetings shall be established by Resolution 2001-08. The time allotted to each individual making a comment shall be 3 minutes unless otherwise set by the presiding officer. Additional public comment may be granted at the discretion of the presiding officer at the conclusion of the meeting. Do I have any public comment for agenda items? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the approval for the minutes of the previous meetings, Board of Supervisor meetings, minutes, October 20th, 2022, AM session.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of October 20th, 2022.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, authorization to pay bills.
I've reviewed the bills, and I will make a motion to authorize to pay the bills and approve the payroll.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, old business. I'm going to turn it over to, I guess we'll start with Luke and give her into to Brian Nagel for the Mapleview proposed parking changes underground basin.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Don't really have much of an introduction other than I'd like to say that we had previously had discussions on this topic. I believe the applicant is seeking a change to their approved plan and has a presentation this morning to that effect. Fair introduction.
Very fair. Good morning. Brian Nagel on behalf of the developer. We've been through this quite a bit. This is the minor amendment to the Mapleview plan, and there was some interface with the residents, as you know. The plan, Christina is here with me this morning, and she can put, why don't you put the plan up on the screen while we're talking about it, please? And the plan's been signed off on by your civil engineer. All the changes that have been discussed have been made. I have confirmation from Tomas, who had shepherded what the neighbors were looking for with that group. I can show you that if you want to see it.
So just, let's backtrack a little bit, because this kind of went onto the back burner for a little while. So we had the meeting, the residents came here with their wants, concerns. I think if I'm mistaken, it was a 93 resident signature authorization of said changes. But then that was it.
They had a list
Right,
of
right.
all the things,
Yep.
so.
And
yeah.
then you guys stepped into your own session, so to speak, in the back, talked about things, and then it got punted to the engineers?
No, I think they came back to us and said, and in fact, it was your suggestion, I believe, to meet with the HOA and the residents and work out a compromise that's reviewed and accepted by.
Right, and I think you guys were in agreement that night.
And then that's when it kind of disappeared.
Right, and
We were in agreement that night, but then subsequent to that, there were some additional details that came up. There were 2 site meetings that occurred, that Tomas attended, representing the neighbors. And then they worked through some additional details. Then it got revised by Christina's office, and then it went to Nate. Then Tomas, it was submitted to Tomas. He signed off on it in an email to me and to Michael Braver. And then it went to Nate for review. There were some additional details that had to be addressed in that process, and now it's in its final form, as was signed off on with the communication from Tomas. There's an open sewer authority issue that still needs to be addressed, which is, and Christina, maybe you can show on the plan while I'm talking about it, please. But there's an open issue there with where they wanted the paving to extend on the top left of the screen there in as far as possible. So the sewer authority, and we've already agreed to provide some bollards there. The only open question is, there's an easement that the sewer authority has, so how far back does that paving go?
right.
So as as a condition of your approval of this minor amendment this morning, we will go to the sewer authority meeting on October, I think it's the 8th, and see what their pleasure is, and we can accommodate whatever their preference is in that section, and then that would be everything.
And our solicitor is here right now. Has the sewer authority had any discussion about this at all yet?
No, not at a public meeting. The board has not discussed it. What happened was apparently there was some construction going on out there, including paving the area in front of the pump station. The sewer authority engineer happened to notice it and issued a report indicating that the pavement appears to be in an easement that's to be dedicated to the authority for the pump station. So, and the authority engineer suggested we have to have bollards to protect an electric transformer and also to make sure nobody parks in the driveway which goes into the pump station.
Got it.
So I suggested to Mr. Nagel that he attend the meeting next Tuesday morning to discuss it with the authority.
Okay.
Then I have a question. Have we ever seen a letter from our engineer reviewing this? I don't
It-
recall
I-
receiving Nate's input at all.
No, there's no formal review because it's just a minor amendment, so it was done through email correspondence. Now, I don't know what Luke and the township staff have seen, but what I have is an email from Nate, basically saying that their concerns have been addressed.
Well, I, for one, would want to see Nate's review letter. Emails between,
There is no review letter. It's a minor amendment, so it's not like a land development plan where you get a formal
I understand that,
review letter.
but when we left here at the meeting, I know specifically was said that the homeowners association and the developer would review it and would work out the plan, and Nate would review it and report back to us.
And that
Because I kept-
occurred.
Huh?
That occurred.
Well, us as the supervisors, and he hasn't reported back to me anything. And I've been asking.
I can't speak to that. All I know is that
I understand that, but
So Luke, what's your last correspondence?
Well, quite honestly, I've had no correspondence on this, but I don't think that that's a sign of anything out of the ordinary. I would have expected the developer to communicate with the township engineer. Do you, Mr. Nagel, do you happen to have a copy? I see you searching. Do you have that record?
yes.
I'll tell you what, make life easier if you don't mind. Just put it on the table. and
Yeah,
just
that's
blow
what I was
it up and
gonna
We
do.
can see it on our screen.
That's
that
what I was
way?
going to do. Yeah.
Perfect.
So there's the email from Nate Craig saying that internally we are good, save some minor items that can be handled in the field. I've sent to Township to confirm / see how they want to proceed from here. And then we were placed on this agenda for the approval of minor amendment. And then there was a follow-up email from Nate. Where he said that we're on the agenda for this morning. Work started, no objections, at your own risk. There's a sewer engineer issue that we talked about. And just checking to make sure we had the sign off from the residents, which obviously we do, and I can show you that as well. So So there's no open issues or concerns from an engineering perspective.
I would think that the biggest hurdle is going to be the municipal authority. Right.
There's no hurdle there, Mr. Chairman. The issue is the sewer authority has to tell us what they want us to do with respect to where that transformer is. We've already agreed to install the bollards that Mr. Estee referenced. So the question is, what's the extent of where the paving ends and where the bollards get put? But besides that, there's really nothing there. It's their preference, and they'll tell us what they want, and we'll do it.
All right, Tom, go ahead.
Can I ask a question about the plan itself? Because
Sure.
how many parking spaces are being well, just to go back, how many parking spaces are being removed by not doing the underground basin? I don't recall now whether it was 20 or 21. 21, is that what it was? Yeah, 21.
So
And how many parking spaces are being added?
Maybe it's 16, 21 would be added.
So originally, in this area, we had 21 parking spaces, because that's where the mailboxes were originally going. We've now replaced that with a rain garden and have added 10 spaces throughout these courts, but there will also be parking along Sugar Maple Square and Paper Bark Square as well.
And that was my primary question. What is the purpose of the red lines on the, I guess it's the western side of the tract along Sugar Maple Square?
This
Are
area,
they parking spaces?
this is just showing, there's going to be a slight pavement widening, and that's just showing the additional area that will be added. So right now, that's currently a grass strip, and the pavement's just going to be extended slightly to allow the residents here to get in and out of their spaces.
So there are not parking spaces there because that's in front of the driveways for those units, correct?
There will be some
Oh, I'm
parking
sorry,
in
that's-
between,
those are the front door-
striping.
I'm sorry, those are the front doors of those units.
Correct, these are the driveways leading up, and then this is the front door of the units over here.
So again, you're adding how many spaces?
So this will not have any striping here, but we're adding in this area between these two courts, we're adding 10 spaces in the cul-de-sac areas.
And Tom, if you'll recall,
Can't be the front
that
doors.
was a
Then the cars are
specific,
gonna-
I'm sorry.
Right, but then she pointed here.
Yeah, but that's the back.
This-
That's what I thought.
Your
Okay.
alleys in the back.
That's what I thought.
This
She
is
said-
their alley parking.
I thought, okay.
if you'll recall, that was a specific request of the residents that it be done that way.
Right. I remember there was some concern about those folks backing out of their driveways.
So procedurally, what we would do is, the board would make a motion to approve the minor amendment this morning with the condition that we go to the sewer authority meeting and meet whatever requirements they have with respect to that transformer. And then we would submit the final plan signed for signature by the board so that can be recorded, so the minor amendment can be recorded with the recorder of deeds.
So, I would assume, based off of what I'm seeing here, this is a guess, but what do you think, 3 cars per set of units? I mean, what is that, length in feet equal out to? I mean, the average car is what, 22 feet?
They have plans for 24, I think, on parking, 24 for parking.
Say it again.
In other correspondence I've reviewed, it's 24 feet for parking,
Right, okay, so you got,
parallel parking.
so from mailbox to curb, you have a red line there on both top and bottom on the one side. What is that linear feet for the red line area?
I think with the math, I think between these two areas, you can fit.
No, just one area, just the one area.
So
want to
average
help us out.
driveway is what, 9, 10 feet?
Correct. I
Isn't
think
that
this is-
parallel parking over here, though?
Yeah, this is,
Right.
this area would be parallel
So
parking.
it's not 9 feet for parallel parking, it's 24 feet.
So,
I'm sorry, what? Okay.
right, so that they can get in and out of the
But
driveways.
but the question's a simple one. What's the distance between the two gray?
I think between These two areas, you can fit about 14.
No, that's not our question. Don't you have a scale on the map? Is there any way
Well,
telling us the number of feet?
if you were to use the driveway, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 feet, you would say 70 feet. And that would be, if you're using the math of 24 feet, you're only getting 2 cars per top and bottom, correct?
In between these spaces?
Correct.
Squeeze 3 in.
I think between these two, we were able to do like 7 or something between each one. Because it was originally striped out here in this area.
And how about on the, you had said that area, and then on the other area across, right?
This area would be the same as well.
So it would be extended in, it's just not,
This area was wider, so this is 28 feet. So there wasn't an issue with backing out and getting out of the driveway and over in paper barks.
now, I kind of remember somebody saying, and maybe I'm totally wrong on that, I kind of remember somebody saying that currently there's a no parking sign in those areas.
Right, those would be removed.
That was for the construction phase.
Okay, all right, I just wanted to make sure that those signs were going to be removed.
Yes.
Correct, we've taken those off of the plans.
So you're unable to give us the lineal length of those parking areas?
I would have to look at that. I don't know that number off the top of my head.
I think based off of the 10-foot rule for driveway, it's about 70 feet per section. Is there grass in between each driveway?
No.
Like a strip, not even a strip, just driveway or butts?
There's
In
rocks.
between these,
Yes,
I think there's gravel out there now.
gravel, so about the typical foot
Correct.
separation
Mhm.
between, so there's probably a little bit more than 70 feet then.
Right, between these two areas, we would be adding about 2,000 square feet of asphalt.
And I'm assuming that the stormwater management was adapted for that?
Correct, and we ran those numbers by Nate, and I mean, the difference in the systems are very negligible, like, 0.02 feet or something like that, very, very minimal, and they're able to still function as they currently do.
Christina, do you have the renderings of the parking lot versus the rain
So you
garden?
get 3 and
that
a
you could
half
show
cars
the
on
board?
each strip using your 84 feet. Well, where's the other half of the car go? So they really get 12 spaces, not 14.
These units, I think, are like 20 foot wide. Oh, you got it. So assume these units are 20 foot wide.
Well, he's assuming they're like 12.
No, the actual unit width,
Why can't they?
no, whatever.
All right, so 20 feet.
I just
And that
want
would
side by
include
side.
Then you add a foot in for the rock or not?
I don't know what it is. The engineers should know.
I don't know.
Plain plan.
So we really don't know how many spaces. I mean, that's what it boils down to. Are those spaces going to be marked?
There won't be any striping.
All right,
whole-
so we really don't know how many spaces they have.
The whole, well, it's, the whole basis of it was that area encompassed the exact number of spaces that there were supposed to be. It's just that the residents asked that they not be striped. So it's laid out exactly as we discussed and exactly as the residents requested. Nothing's changed. So it's exactly what was discussed before. It's just, it's not striped.
Just remind me one more time, is this, is these roads dedicated or undedicated?
Undedicated.
They're
Undedicated.
undedicated.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I pose a question?
Yeah.
On the large uncolorized plan, will you return to that, please?
Yeah, well, and Thompson, come back with it.
Okay, looking at the eastern end, the Phase 3, are there any Phase 3 units completed at this time?
I don't think so.
Okay. And When you were summarizing the changes, I'd point out that there are 2 additional spaces at the end of what was alley C, or what is
Correct,
on
can you
here.
point those out, Christina, please?
Yeah.
Right up
So there's 2 additional units there that weren't on the approved plan.
Correct.
Okay, and I appreciate that the residents of Phase 1 and 2, which are in place, would have feedback about the lion's share of the improvements on here. Do you think that there's enough parking for overflow for the future residents of Phase 3 with those 2 spaces?
Absolutely, absolutely, more than enough.
Thank you.
Sure. And I'll also show you, can you pull that off for a second, please? This is, Luke, can I get a little zoom in to show
Sure.
communication from Tomas? So you can see here that I sent the final plan after the site visits and everything to Moss, and he responded at the end of August saying he was accepting of the proposal attached, Mapleview Parking Exhibit, and it has that number, and that's consistent with what we're showing the board today, correct? And then after that, we've, you can see Tomas was following up to find out, what's the status of this being approved, and so that's where we are now. And I've heard from Tomas probably 3 times asking, when is this going to be approved? And so that's why we're here today.
Right. But the spirit of my question wasn't questioning the HOA's input, just pointing out that we're at about 66% build out, and the remaining 33% of residents who have not yet moved in are going to lose access to surface parking lot with this change.
Yeah, we discussed that 4 months ago, Luke.
Hmm.
That's already, we talked about all that. We've already been through this. That's why we went through this whole process.
Correct. Well, I'm not arguing that the plan isn't consistent with the code. I'm simply,
But it's well beyond it's not consistent with the code. It's well beyond the code.
I'm
Far beyond.
assuming that the new homeowners are being informed that the old plan is most likely not still on the table, meaning the new people coming in to buy houses aren't looking at it saying, oh, look, there's a parking spot right over here.
That's a good point. That's one of the reasons we need to get the plan submitted and signed and recorded, so we can put it in the package that's going to those home buyers. We can't put it in there until we have the approved plan. So we have to get it approved, recorded, and then it gets added to the public offering statement that goes to the home buyers so that they can be aware of what's out there.
that, the chairman just much more succinctly put what I was getting at, which is, would this be communicated to our future residents?
Absolutely. We just
Very
can't,
good.
we can't do that until we have a recorded plan that we can then put in the public offering statement that goes to those home buyers so they can see what they're buying into. So it's important that we get this completed, get the plan submitted. It still has to be signed by the board and then recorded. So obviously what we'll do is we'll go to the municipal authority meeting on the 8th. We'll find out what their wishes are. We'll have the plan reflect that, and then the plan set will get obviously dropped off to you, Luke, so it can be signed by the supervisors and we get it recorded.
So, on my behalf, I can only speak for me. My requirement would be A, HOA approval, B, final sign off by our engineer, and then C, final sign off by the municipal authority. I don't know if I'm missing anything, Tom. Is there anything you can think of?
Well, if the board is inclined to grant it,
I'd like to add one other thing. I want to know those dimensions so we have an idea of how many parking spaces. Pardon me? She just doesn't have to be.
Originally, when this was striped between these 2 areas, there was 14 spaces between the 2 of them, parallel parking spaces, and same goes on this side. So between these 2 areas in the alleyway, there's 28 spaces total. for parallel parking, they're just not striped anymore.
And I think realistically, you can probably scratch off 2 just for people not being, accommodating, but let's,
Correct, and
and
they're-
again, you're still over what you were.
Way over.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right, yeah. I mean, again, I'm only speaking for myself, but, Tom, what was the other thing, aside from the spots being over what was original, what was the other thing?
I think that, as you suggested, we should get written confirmation from the Mapleview Homeowners Association sent directly to the township that they support this plan amendment, that secondly, that the plan be approved by the East Brandywine Township Municipal Authority and the applicant comply with any conditions of approval of the authority, that the applicant add signature blocks to the plan so it can be recorded, that, and I don't know whether this was sent to the Chester County Planning Commission. I'm not sure if you can record it without the Planning Commission's approval, so that would be another condition, if required, for recording, that we receive written confirmation from the township engineer directly to the township that there are no outstanding engineering issues, that there be no further construction on the site in accordance with this plan until it's approved, signed, and recorded, and that all future buyers from this day forward be advised that this is the new plan applicable to their purchase.
Yeah.
And I guess finally, that the applicant confirm the number of spaces along the western side of Sugar Maple Square,
We'll include that in the submission of the plans.
and the eastern side too.
You get all that, Brian?
I think I did.
I mean, the tape will speak for itself, but again, the way that Tom just clarified that, I have no concerns.
And when you're speaking of the HOA approval, I'm assuming that means I have to contact Tomas and ask him to send an
So
email.
are you at
Not an
majority?
email, a letter.
A letter?
A letter to the township saying we agree with the plans. That's what I understood when we left here a couple months ago.
I never understood there to be a distinction between a letter and an email, but I'll talk to Tomas about that.
Are you guys at capacity for your HOA, or is it still builder-controlled HOA?
It's partial.
So it's 50/50 right now?
I don't know what the percentages
The reason
are.
why I say that is because this throws another little problem here, because now you're giving, if it is the builder-controlled, you're giving the builder the authority to sign off on by the HOA.
No. Look, going back months ago, what was worked out was that Tomas was going to be the representative of all those folks, and they agreed that we should work with him to resolve the issues, so that's what we did. So that's what we're talking about here.
Saying, though.
Yeah, I'm not going to
I
submit.
don't want to have a letter come back
No.
from the builder
No, of
saying,
course
I
not.
approve this.
No,
You know,
no.
you follow what I'm saying? Because
It's going to
they-
come from Tomas.
Right.
That's the established protocol, and that's what we're going to stick with.
All right, so, does anybody want to make a motion based off of Tom's notes? And Tom, do you want to read them one more time, just for clarity?
I think the proposed conditions would be, one, written confirmation from the Mapleview Homeowners Association sent directly to the township that they support the plan amendment. Number two, written approval from the East Brandywine Township Municipal Authority of the proposed parking spaces and paving in front of the pump station in compliance with any conditions of approval of the authority, that the applicant add signature blocks to the plan necessary for plan recording, that the applicant obtain the approval of the Chester County Planning Commission if it's necessary to record the plan, that the township receive written confirmation from the township engineer that they have no objections or proposed or necessary revisions to the plan, that there be no further construction on the site in pursuance of this plan until it's signed and recorded, that the applicant confirm the actual number of spaces which are to be added by parallel parking along the two roadways, and also the number of spaces that are going to be striped back in the Paper Bark Square and Sugar Maple Square, and that all buyers be advised of this new plan prior to signing an agreement of sale.
And I think I would just add that the spots being added are more than the original plan showed. With all that said,
Sorry, I don't think that last point is accurate. It is fair to say that the spots provided in both the original plan and the revised plan exceed those required by the ordinance. But I do think this is a net loss of spaces.
no, from the last, with the parking, I'm sorry, with the parking lot, I should have said. Yeah, it was 16 spots taking the parking lot out.
I don't know the precise number, but it is.
Anybody else?
I wouldn't add that. Last thing is relevant.
Well, if it comes back that you can get only 2 spots there, then we're gonna have a problem. That's all. Absolutely.
Parallel parking on either side, which are widening those spaces. They're widening because we're making it two-way instead of one-way. The parking spaces were there originally, and they're not two spaces. So it should not be part of that calculation of 21 lots of units that there is 21.
Got it.
Any new spaces are the ones at the end of each area near the gas.
Right.
Yeah, I think that the fact is that there were 21 spaces in the surface parking lot where the underground basin was to be constructed, and this plan adds 10 new spaces. So we have a net loss. What?
Plus the 2 in the C.
Correct. That's correct.
12 new, the 2 where?
At the end of the phase 3, Tom.
Well, you told me 10, so it's 12. So it adds 12 new spaces, and so it's a net loss of 10 spaces.
All right, so we'll scratch my last note, but aside from that, anything else that you can think of?
I'll make the motion to
Approve the, and does this have,
amended.
yeah, does this have a date on it? All I have is, does it have a date on it?
The plan?
Date, last revised?
Yes.
We have the date of
Date of what?
11/1/2022 on this plan.
And there are no revision dates?
Correct.
So it's a motion to approve the proposed plan amendment prepared by Nave Newell for Mapleview, sheet 1 of 1 dated November 1st, 2022, subject to the 8 conditions previously recited by the solicitor. How's that sound?
Sounds good to me.
I'll second. All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a nice day.
2.
Go Eagles and Phillies.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Luke now for the Historical Commission request, or response to the O'Neill request to remove HR 55 and HR 58 the historic resources map.
Yeah, at a previous meeting, resident Terry O'Neill, who owns at least 2 residential parcels in the township, appeared before the Board of Supervisors and asked that his 2 residential parcels, what are listed on our historic resources map as HR 55 and HR 58, be removed from the zoning overlay. Consistent with the procedure described in our code, that became an agenda item for the Historical Commission to provide a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. Included in your packet is a letter dated October 31st, 2022, from the Historical Commission recommending that both parcels be retained on that map and citing reasons for so doing. This letter was sent to Mr. O'Neill and carbon copied to you as the board. There is no action item unless the board wants to direct staff or the ordinance task force or some other committee to proceed with a course of action that would amend our code.
Tom, what's your take?
What Luke said is accurate, that if the board is not inclined to remove these 2 resources, then no action is necessary.
I'm assuming there's no tax break, there's nothing of that sort that would affect either way for the homeowner?
Well, I can't really speak on behalf of the homeowner. This is a local decision. We've placed them on the Historic Resources map. The Historical Commission has given you a letter in support of that determination, which, by the way, happened many, many years ago,
Right.
I think prior to Mr. O'Neill's purchase. Certainly, the ordinance places certain requirements on the property because it's so identified, and it also provides some benefits to the property. As the Historical Commission pointed out, at least in its opinion, the fact that it's classified as an historic resource has not hindered his development of the property, and in fact, the Historical Commission agreed with everything he wanted to do to the existing structures.
You guys have any questions? All right, so I don't think we need a motion per se, right?
No, this all goes back to a letter that Mr. O'Neill sent, maybe 90 days ago, requesting us the supervisors to remove him from the list. That would take action if we wanted to remove him.
And I don't believe
And
Mr.
after-
O'Neill's here today anyway, so.
After studying it, and I reread the letter the other day. His only reason was it was just more bureaucratic stuff. It's not going to affect the property value at all, so unless we're going to remove it, there's no action.
All right, Bruce, I have you coming up for the Planning Commission update.
Good morning. Last night we had a planning commission meeting, and one of our agenda items was 252 Reed's Road. And it's a 2-lot subdivision on 21 acres. It's supposed to be going to the zoning hearing board for 3 zoning questions and one other item. Can't remember what it was. We had a nice long discussion with the applicants, and the applicants are here. And we made a suggestion to the applicant to take our discussion, review it, and come back in a month to review it and see if we're supporting their application or not. We gave them lots of different ideas. Some were good, some were bad, but it's up to the applicant at this point. So the applicant in the meeting agreed to postpone his zoning hearing, which is November the 10th, I believe, to the next zoning hearing board. That's what the Planning Commission thought would be the best direction to go. So that's all I really have to say to that. I know the applicant's here. Maybe they would like to make a comment from that point on.
Just for purposes of the minutes, I think it's 525 Reed's Road?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, up on the thing, it's on the board.
I know it is. We transposed some numbers.
I would do that too. Tom, do you have any, does that sound correct?
That's what happened, that it was suggested the applicant sort of go back to the drawing board and see whether there might be less impact on the steep slopes. So they've agreed to do that and postpone the zoning hearing. So it's not necessary for the board to take any action this morning.
You guys have anything to add?
I'd just like to say, I mean, we're doing this.
I'm sorry.
You can come up.
In this case, we are recording this for later broadcast.
I
so.
apologize. So my name is Jamie. I'm one of the applicants for the zoning board that we postponed until next month. And like Bruce said, there was a lot of back and forth yesterday, a lot of ideas, and I guess we're just doing this as a precaution. We want to push it off a month to make sure we, cross our T's and dot our I's. But with that said, it seemed like there was maybe some misunderstanding at the Planning Commission last night. These plans have been plans that we've been working on with 3 different engineers over the course of almost 2 years. We received feedback from Nate, your engineer, and all 3 pretty much confirmed that this is how it would need to be done with the least amount of ask from the township. So that's why we came up with that plan. It wasn't just scratched on a napkin and brought in. With that said, we know it's a lot that has a lot of complexities, and before we go ahead and hire lawyers and engineers, and which we're already involved with now, we wanted to basically come here with a concept, spending the least amount of money as possible, trying to get a blessing, or at least some feedback saying, this looks like something that's feasible. Now go back and do your calculations and give us more details. So I guess we didn't have enough details to suffice for the Planning Commission yesterday. So we're going to be working with our engineer on that. With that said, I don't, like I said, we've consulted with 3 different engineers, the township engineer included, and that seems to be the plan. So that's all I have to say about that. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to go over to the Stormwater Management Program update with Beth Euler.
See, my name is next to that, but I don't have much to say. I think, as the board knows, the state and county required that all municipalities update their what's called the Act 167 Stormwater Management Ordinance. I think there was a committee that worked on this for some months with Beth's guidance, and they came up with certain amendments to our ordinance. And the purpose of this ordinance 4 of 2022 is to enact those amendments. It's been properly advertised, so it's before the board for your consideration.
Right. I would add just one thing. There's actually 2 items on the agenda. One is some housekeeping that's required as part of our minimum control measures, which is annual, which we're going to satisfy, and then later there is a vote on the county's model stormwater ordinance.
Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped ahead.
That's quite all right. There are 2 stormwater matters here.
Yeah, lucky you. 2 stormwater matters today. Thank you for having me this morning. Good morning to the board. My name's Beth Euler with Cedarville Engineering. Been working with the township for several years on the NPDES MS4 Stormwater Management Program. Here to just provide an annual update. And I'm going to give a little bit of background. Everybody at this point that's a member of the board has heard the background, but this is for the benefit of any members of the public that may not be familiar with the program. It is an acronym-laden program, so just to spell out the The name of the permit program, it's called National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Permit. And it's similar to any other stormwater discharge permit, like a construction site would get for earth disturbance, same permit program. But this is just for municipalities with a certain amount of urbanized area associated with it. Why is the program important? It's something that gets a lot of buzz because it's an unfunded mandate for municipalities, but it is important because the intent is to reduce pollutants into the municipal storm sewer system and in the streams, and then in turn protects water quality, which everyone benefits from, whether it's recreational or drinking water source or anything like that. And then, of course, if that's something that's not important to you, it is a state and federal requirement that's administered in Pennsylvania by Department of Environmental Protection, and then, excuse me, enforced on a federal level by the Environmental Protection Agency. And they will come periodically and do inspections or audits. EPA is likely not going to come to East Brandywine Township anytime soon, knock on wood, but DEP in the Southeast region has recently started to conduct their inspections. So we actually were just a part of an inspection with Westtown Township in August, so their goal is to make it to every MS4 municipality in the Southeast region during this permit term. So within the next few years, you'll get an inspection from DEP. They're looking for voluntary compliance to show that their statewide program is compliant with the federal requirements in EPA. So they're not necessarily going to be coming to issue fines to the municipality. They really want to work with municipalities to make sure that your program is compliant, so they look good to the federal agencies as well. The township's program components at a glance. In years past, I've gone through each minimum control measure in detail. There are 6 of them, and the requirement has been the same for the past, about 20 years or so. So there's public education and outreach, public involvement and participation, which is what this meeting is a part of. So any feedback that the public may have about the stormwater program, would be happy to accept any of the comments today. And then illicit discharge detection and elimination, that's your mapping of your storm sewer system, making sure you do periodic inspections to make sure there isn't any pollution coming out of the township storm sewer system. Construction site stormwater runoff control, which is erosion and sediment control during the land development process and earth disturbance process. And post-construction stormwater management for development and redevelopment, which is how we manage stormwater for the long term as a result of development. And then make sure that those best management practices that are installed are properly operated and maintained by the responsible party long term. The township is responsible to make sure that happens, and does do inspections on a regular basis for those best management practices. And then pollution prevention, good housekeeping, which is really any activities that the municipality undertakes and making sure that you're not actually physically contributing to pollution of stormwater or to our streams. So that would be public works, making sure that your salt's contained in the salt storage shed, spent oil is properly disposed of, things of that nature. And then the requirement that was added the last permit term was pollutant reduction plan, and now East Brandywine Township, compared to a lot of our neighbors, has slightly less requirement in this area. This is to address streams that are impaired by sediment or nutrients. And there's 2 projects that have been identified to meet these requirements, and I'll talk about that a little bit more detail. These are actual projects that are required to be put in the ground to reduce sediment pollution to the 2 streams that are impaired in East Brandywine for sediment, which is Culbertson Run and the unnamed tributaries to Beaver Creek that are highlighted here in this map. Projects need to be installed basically anywhere within these watersheds, could be all in Culbertson Run or all in the unnamed tributary to Beaver Creek watershed, in order to reduce sediment by 10% over the 5-year permit term. So I have that date, I think, in a later slide here. So the proposed projects that were mentioned earlier there's 2 in the Culbertson Run watershed. The first one has already been implemented, and this was the Culbertson Run stormwater improvements along Hawthorne Drive. There was a lot of erosion occurring along the roadside swales. It was damaging to the roadside itself, also causing damage to the right-of-way and also private property. But this was a water quality issue as well, because it drains the Culbertson Run, which was impaired by sediment. So what we did was designed a project that restored vegetated swales and installed 5 subsurface infiltration and detention basins within the township road right-of-way. This project was partially funded by a Growing Greener grant. Looks like a zero was chopped off there, but it was about $250,000, and that was back in 2019. Had a lot of challenges, but was successful now. The project had been completed in 2021, and was a really good example of a project that both improves water quality but also addresses infrastructure issues within the township. So there's some before and after pictures there. Of course, you can't see the subsurface basin, but it's under there. Again, this provided about 2.5% of the sediment reduction that's required out of the 10%. And then the last project is approximately 425 linear feet of stream restoration along the Hideaway Farms Homeowners Association property, and it's actually on Culbertson Run itself, the stream that's impaired for sediment. This project is going to provide the remaining 7.5% sediment reduction, and will satisfy the township's permit requirements for this term. So where are we now with this? We completed a feasibility study funding strategy back in 2020. What's really great about this particular property is there's plenty of opportunity to expand the scope in future years, because one thing that we know for sure is that DEP has made it pretty clear that these requirements aren't going to go away in the next permit term. Whether or not they require it in the next 5 years, there'll be additional sediment reduction requirements in the future at some point. So this year we applied for 2 different sources of grant funding and still waiting to hear back. We were assisted by a supervisor with the ARPA funding to apply for a grant for the project, as well as the Growing Greener program again. Growing Greener awards have not been announced yet, so that's still pending. We've also been coordinating with the Army Corps of Engineers. They have an easement along this section of the property that was developed as part of the development and their Chapter 105 404 permitting, and so that's moving forward as well. And so we anticipate the project being designed and permitted in 2023, and then going into construction at the end of 2023, and then completed by August 2024. Okay, and then another thing that we've been talking about, and it is on the agenda today, so I figured I would briefly touch on it. And the solicitor also mentioned that the stormwater ordinance was required to be updated this year. This was kind of another kind of unique requirement compared to the other years. So this was required by the MS4 permit and also the countywide Act 167 plan. And the county adopted an updated countywide model ordinance that was in compliance with DEP's requirements, and then issued that to all the municipalities in the county. DEP's formal approval is still pending. However, they've given informal approval of the ordinance itself. The original due date of the updated ordinance was September 30th with your annual report. However, because of the timeline, DEP has said, report where you are with the process as long as you're not lagging too far behind, say like a year behind, that should be acceptable. So the goal, informally is to adopt it before the end of the year, and so it's being presented to the board. this morning. I might have said this evening already. I don't know. I get confused at this meeting. So that's all I have for you today. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Whatever happened with us partnering with West Brandywine? Did that ever?
That never, yeah, that never worked out. So, I mean, that's certainly something that could always come back in the future, you know, because they're always going to have the same requirements too. But they were just not on the same timeline as us. So we tried, and you know, again, maybe we'll get on this same timeline at some point, but it wasn't. We had to continue to move forward. Yeah.
Something happened.
Yep.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
So Beth will be sticking around. We also have another iteration of the minimum control measures is staff training, which will occur later today.
Okay.
So Beth, can I ask you to stick around for the ordinance as well?
Yep.
For any questions?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, who wants to handle the draft preliminary budget report?
Budget committee.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think they heard you.
Oh, we're gonna go over the budget committee now, the preliminary. You guys wanna?
Have a speaker and present it?
Ben Noakes, Chairman of the Budget Committee. In your packet, there's a draft submission of the budget we're recommending.
She took the
Sorry.
mic.
In your packet, there's a draft version of the budget that we're recommending for right now. If you have any high-level questions, I can answer them right now. Any detailed questions, we'll take them up at our next meeting on November 10th. So you can just email them either to Luke or Carl, and we'll discuss them and make sure we get you some answers.
I just glanced through this a little bit. Overall, you guys are happy with things?
You might talk about that it's balanced and any,
Yeah, each fund is balanced. We went through really line by line. We tried to be conservative with revenues and expenses, so we feel good about it. There's a couple items such as the ambulance service and stuff like that, that some decisions need to be made on that. Maybe Carl can get into more detail on that. But yeah, we feel pretty good about the budget overall.
are there any rate increases? Tax increases?
Rate ain't no tax increases.
May I, just,
But I'm trying to lead him.
there you go.
He does not. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I don't object to be the bearer of bad news, even though it is a minor bit of bad news. The budget does anticipate an increase to the recycle and trash rates, which have not been amended in many years. And it is anticipated that the board will consider a fee schedule with higher permit costs in the coming year. That also has not been amended in many years.
Where are we with our current refuse and recycling on that contract? Did we do that 3-year extension?
So the contract is 5 years with options to extend for a single year in 4 and 5. We have taken them up on the 4th year extension, which begins next year. Sorry? I've not been notified that we can talk about that, but I suspect, yes.
If you turn to page 8, at the bottom. You'll see that the total, total expenditures are 6.3 $1.23 million, but that leaves us with a revenue, if you go back to page 3, I think it is, the total revenues. Are
It's gonna be page
2.
2.
Okay, yep.
Boy.
There we go, 6.454 million. So we do have a excess of revenues over expenditures of $131,000. And that's after the transfers to the capital fund, correct?
Transfers to the capital fund will occur in the current fiscal year.
Right, that's what I meant after.
Right, so you are accurately describing an operating surplus anticipated for next year.
Ben, besides the ambulance, was there anything also that was new?
I don't recall anything that was totally new. There's, I guess, variances and expenses, particularly capital expenditures, that are new to this year, but not a new activity for the township.
If you turn to page 6, about halfway down under ambulance and rescue, 412. You'll see that the amount recommended by the budget committee for the 2023 budget is $30,450 versus prior years of $4,500. As you know, they did come to the supervisors and make a case, and I don't know whether, did they come to the budget committee or to you, Luke, on the?
A presentation was made at the budget committee,
Okay.
and then
I had so many
also
presentations, I've lost track a little.
their precise ask was eventually arriving at $30 per household, but they proposed
Which
that
would
it
be
be
3
phased in
times
over
this
3
amount.
years.
And they're suggesting that we add that 30 each year, and I was late to the budget committee due to a prior conflict, and when this was discussed, and my feelings is that we're willing to increase our budget, but each year stands on its own. I'm not making any guarantee that it'll double and then go up. I mean, and I still think, in their presentation, they were going to discontinue their fundraising, and I think that's a decision I would hope that they rethink. The fundraising does raise money, and has been successful with our fire company too, so, I'll still contribute to the fundraising. Pardon me? Yeah. Anybody else have any other questions on the budget? You like it when it comes in balance, see, that's.
What was the difference in revenue, why it drops? Is that
You're talking versus
Last year.
last year's budget or last
Right.
year's? What we did is we took a projection for actuals of this year and tried to build our budget off of this year's actuals versus the budget. We felt it gave us a better indication of where we were going to land and what we needed to put in the budget for this coming year. A lot of the budget numbers are inflated a little bit, or just not realistic. So we really went and dug into each of those numbers and determined what was really going to happen, and used that to build our budget.
The main drop was transfer taxes. And we monitored the transfer taxes up through September. In August and September, the number of transfer taxes, are running 50% of what they were earlier in the year.
Yeah.
So certainly don't want to budget 2023 revenues based on 2022 transfer taxes. So the real estate taxes is based on what the tax collector furnished us, and that might be a little conservative, but you're gonna have less interim taxes this year.
Right.
For new construction. And the earned income tax is the one they spent the most time trying to figure out, and that's kind of hard, so they went with a conservative number, right?
Yeah, I'd say overall, we went conservative whenever possible.
Right.
Well, I, for one, would like to thank you guys all for your service for this. This budget committee is huge and it helps us a lot, and obviously, there's a lot to dive into here, but the amount of time that you guys put in is to be commended, so I thank you for that.
Thank you.
And the committee was a different format this year, just so you know. We had four members plus myself as a even though I was a supervisor, as a kind of a working member. And I thought they brought a whole new approach. Three of the five were new to the budget committee. Alan was, although he's new to the committee, is not new to the
Right,
township,
exactly.
which he brought a great deal of strength to. And Ben, it was interesting. I'm a CPA, so I'm dealing with historic numbers. Ben's a financial analyst. He could care less what the historic numbers are. What are you going to do for me tomorrow? So that brought a whole new dynamic to the budget committee. And we're going to try to utilize the budget committee going forward to make some financial studies within the township. So it's going to be sort of an ongoing committee.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'd like to, first of all, am I recognized? May I just give a procedural note?
Absolutely.
Okay, so there is no action item this morning. Believe it or not, there are only 3 more meetings of the Board of Supervisors this year. In each of the next 3 meetings, there will be an item that the board will be asked to consider. I'm going to start with the regular PM session in November. At that time, you will be asked to authorize staff to advertise a draft preliminary agenda for public comment. At your AM session in December, you will have resolutions that set tax rates and fee schedules for the coming year. And then in your December PM meeting, you'll be asked to adopt a final budget for 2023. So it's just been the tradition of the Budget Committee, who incidentally has met 7 times since August alone, to give the board time to process this preliminary draft. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a question from the audience. Sandy, if you don't mind coming up, please.
I think Ruth just answered my question. I wanted to know what the process was for asking reconsideration for an item that's in the budget for our Automobile Library. I don't know if you were clear enough when you did the presentation. We asked for $2,000. They the most important thing, $500 for the computer. So I'd like to, do I send a letter, or do I come to this meeting with a public comment?
I think come to the meeting with the public comment would be best. That way, or it doesn't have to be you, it could be anybody from the.
Okay, I didn't, well, Luke just answered the question for me.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, thank you again. Ordinances, resolution for consideration. I'll turn this over to Tom.
Well, I think I apologize for going out of order. I already gave my spiel on the ordinance, and I think Beth touched on it briefly. So you have before you ordinance 4 of 2022, which are amendments to your stormwater management ordinance.
Right. I will add that this has gone through reviews by both the Ordinance Task Force and the Planning Commission. There were elements of the county's model ordinance that were presented as optional for the township, and there were elements of the model ordinance that are not optional. Beth, correct me if you disagree with my summary. I would say in all instances that I recall, we
More
Right. The reason I wanted to start with that point is because while there are things that could be changed when we began, what we're down to is more or less what we're required to do. Right, and you'll, please forgive my lack of enthusiasm. As a member of staff, I think it's important to note that stormwater ordinance, especially for small projects, is probably the single largest generator of resident dissatisfaction that I deal with on a daily basis. That said, this is not optional from my perspective.
And Tom, do you,
So then why bother to vote then?
Well, it is because you're required to enact the amendments.
That sounds like some other countries that aren't necessarily democratically run.
Understood.
It is a very worthwhile cause. I'll say that.
No, you don't.
all right, does anybody have any questions? All right, then would be prudent for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we adopt Ordinance 4 of 2022, adopting the countywide Act 167 Stormwater Management Model Ordinance Update.
A second, all in favor?
Aye.
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 I was reluctant. Okay, all right.
Why vote nay and create a problem?
Official map, so now we're gonna turn it over to Luke and I guess Beth again.
So the official map looks familiar to you. It's because at a previous meeting, you authorized the board to send this for Act 247 review. Included in your packet is a revised official map and the same ordinance. The reason it's before you again is because during county's 247 review, they identified that the ordinance that I submitted for their review did not match the ordinance last reviewed by the Grant Steering Committee. So in order to rectify that, I sent a letter to the county withdrawing it from 247 review. Once the plan was back before the ordinance task force, we took the opportunity to make a couple amendments that we received both from observations from reviewers and from the public comment period. So I want to just very briefly summarize what's changed in the map, starting with the removal of a trail segment that was shown in the Timbers development, the addition of a trail segment that was recently received preliminary plan approval in the McCausland Plank land development. There are numerous labeling errors that were addressed. Among them were that you could not read where the lines were when they overlapped with a label. Also, street directions such as North Bailey or North Guthriesville lost their directional prefixes. We also added a new disclaimer in the lower left-hand corner of the plan that is to establish that if someone is looking at this plan with an eye towards planning their weekend hike on a trail, our showing of a trail does not mean that there is public access to that trail. Just to establish this as a planning document, not a marketing material for your recreation activities. And with that, I respectfully ask that the board authorize staff to resubmit this new revised official map to Chester County Planning Commission for Act 247 review.
I move that we submit our revised official map to the county for approval.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Luke, we'll keep going for the guest overflow parking revision.
Right. Well, we added this to the agenda. We as staff added this to the agenda before it was known that the ordinance task force would like another bite at this draft ordinance based on feedback they received from the township engineer. So there is no action item this morning, but I do want to point out that we had a conversation, our very first agenda item this morning, that had to do with a plan that was compliant both in its approved state and its amended state with parking. The spirit of what the ordinance task force is working on is revising our ordinance so that when a developer proposes a townhome, they're providing not only enough parking based on the number of units there, but that a certain portion of the parking spaces are provided in common areas, so that if there is an event at a home, a birthday party or similar, there's sufficient parking elsewhere in the development. And that's the spirit of the language that's being proposed here.
May I add a little more specific in that any one unit is limited to counting the driveway and garages to 2 places.
What about, there's been a lot of,
And,
I'm sorry, I cut you off.
well, the only other thing is that I think the main reason it's being tabled is Nate had some ideas that the language was a little verbose, and that's probably true. There's a lot of verbose language in our land development and zoning things, but I'm more I'm concerned with some questions which I will save for the ordinance task force.
I think we should also include a solution to the common parking for where people, you get a lot of people that are not allowed. HOAs are include language that cannot park like a lettered vehicle in the neighborhood. So all of a sudden you have these homeowners that, for example, I know one gentleman works for Pico, and he's not allowed to park in Applecross, even though there's common parking for guests and everyone. He has nowhere to park his vehicle now. And I think that needs to be addressed, or at least brought up to the.
Right, I mean, I know a lot of HOAs, no ladder truck, no ladder racks.
Sure, like that, but I mean, there
Yeah.
should be somewhere for them to park. I mean, I think at least it should be addressed by the ordinance task force, because there has been at least 3 different.
And do we have authority over an
That's why I don't
HOA?
know, that's why I
Yeah.
figured just.
I don't know.
I would think it would be something we would talk about in the land development plan, that we would, you know, but I agree with you, it would be a good idea to have some sort of an overflow parking for, you know, at least. Yeah, for at least, you know, 3 to
At least
5
have it addressed.
vehicles someplace. I think that's a very valid point.
My concern is that we need to do this rapidly, because all this stuff we've had with Mapleview would have been
Done by now, yeah.
gone. It wouldn't have been a problem.
Especially before the, well.
I think one of my main questions, I'll bring it up now, just since it's a public meeting in a good place, and we actually have some public here, and it's being recorded. One of the things is that a lot of the road construction details, such as curbing or bump outs, et cetera, was put into the language, and Nate's kind of recommending that it not be put in. And my question is then, where do you put that in? Is that covered someplace else under our land planning? Because, I mean, leaving it up to the builder, well, you'll never see another curb again, or a bump out, or maybe you won't even see paving. Luke, would that,
Well,
where does that belong, those
right.
kind of?
So I would say, as a guiding principle, that we should have the minimum change to our code to achieve what we've identified as a shortcoming. And what we've identified as a shortcoming is that the current code says that you shall provide X number of parking spaces per unit. If the developer takes that direction and says, well, there's 2 in the driveway and there's 2 in the garage, so I'm providing 4 spaces per unit, I don't need to provide parking anywhere else in this development. And that creates a problem for when in a townhome development, like I said, there's an event or, where are those individuals going to park if not their neighbors' driveways? So the fundamental part of this proposed amendment would to say that a certain proportion of the required parking must be provided for in a common area, not on an individual lot. The second concern that we have, from a public policy perspective, that we want to achieve in this change is that we don't want spaces in very short driveways that overlap sidewalks to count either, because we don't want to cram spaces that count towards that minimum in very tight. I think the spirit of Nate's feedback is if those two rules alone are enough, let the developer propose how they will satisfy them based on standard specs that are elsewhere in the code. There's no reason to say,
Well, that was my point. So they are elsewhere in the code?
yes.
Okay. That makes sense. That'll lop off 2 pages of that code.
If I may, I looked at Nate's I haven't been involved in this in detail
Yet.
but and Nate's comments seem to indicate, let the developer decide where he wants to put the common parking lot. And maybe I'm misinterpreting that. I think that's somewhat risky, because a developer left to his own devices is going to put the parking lot wherever he thinks it's convenient, which might not be too convenient for the homeowner, so.
So
and I-
within a certain proximity.
Right, and so if there are other regulations somewhere else in the ordinance that would control that, for example, sight distance coming out of the parking lot and its proximity to the units, fine, but I'm not so sure it's something that should just be unregulated.
So,
Go ahead.
And this might not be the appropriate place to
You can talk to Nate.
discuss.
So speaking of the appropriate place, the Township Board of Supervisors relies on input from the Ordinance Task Force, which makes recommendations to the Planning Commission, which makes recommendations to this board about changes to the Land Development Code. I think with the benefit of hindsight in getting this feedback, a more appropriate place to have the dialogue about a proposed amendment would be the Planning Commission itself. And I say that because it is routinely staffed by both the solicitor and the township engineer.
now we're kicking something to you.
Right, no, this is not the first time it's been brought up.
I like that.
And, I mean, quite frankly, you hate to make a meeting longer, but you're going to actually shorten the time, and the ordinance task force meetings are not well attended. And the people that do attend attend the planning commission also.
Makes sense. Now what?
So that's not an action item, but it was an update. So,
Understood. Thank you. Any public comment on non-agenda items? Seeing none, notices the board, regular meeting of the pension committee will be held at the conclusion of this meeting. An executive session of the Board of Supervisors will be held at conclusion of the pension committee meeting to discuss legal and real estate matters. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody.